So the Rugby Championship 2024 competition continues to heat up in this game. Springboks versus All Blacks, the first of two. The fact that we get this game twice in a row, we are spoilt for the amount of international rugby happening for the Southern Hemisphere. And in this video, myself and Rugbyitch, we are going to be trying to predict who is going to be in that Springboks 23-man side to take on the All Blacks. But Tim, this game taking place at Ellis Park. The atmosphere is already building. The All Blacks winning one of their two games. The Springboks sit on top of the table with 2 from 2. Do you see them? I'm going to say it at the moment. Do you see a South African clean sweep in this Rugby Championship?
Oh, I mean, right off the back, I'm going to say you can never count off the All Blacks. They're just too good of a side to just disregard them off the back. But I will say the Springboks going into these two games will be favorites. I think that's a clear thing that even the media's even said as well. But I believe the Springboks going into this game will be the favorites. I mean, they are playing both of the games in South Africa, so you'd expect them to kind of go into it all guns firing. But at the same time, the All Blacks they look pretty good in that second test, and they kind of turn things around and they look back to their normal selves. So they're going to be pretty dangerous coming up to South Africa. So I am looking forward to both tests.
And both teams stacked for this Rugby Championship. Definitely these two leagues, we see a couple returns for the Springboks, which does make us wonder how many of those men will then get the opportunity here. Rassi, spoiled for choice, but in your front row, who have you gone with as the 1, 2, and 3? Is there a spicy plum in the starting lineup up against the ABs here?
Maybe. But I have gone with the standard one here in Oxenche. I started number 1. I just think he's the sure thing, kind of starting that position. For number 2, this is where I have gone with Bongi Manombi to go in the number 2 place. Again, we didn't see much of him, I'd say, in the 2 games in Australia, because again, he did go off, I think, in the 15th minute within that first test, and he wasn't involved in the second. So I kind of want to see a bit more of him involved in this first test. That's the reason why I've gone with him to start. And then for the third position, I have gone with Frans Mahamba to finish it off for the front row. I just think he's like, it's just the most solid front row you can kind of come up with. And Frans Mahamba and Oxenche and that scrum is going to do some damage. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
For myself, I have gone exactly the same. Oxenche as my number 1. Number 2, Bongi Umbanambi. Now, that's a jersey that could be debated once again. I think it's always going to be debated, though, whether or not Malcolm Marx is seen more of a starter in the future, or whether he is that impact player coming off the bench at 16. I just feel like he's way too dangerous off the bench to put him into the starting lineup. It seems like Umbanambi's still able to do the job in that starting side. And then Frans Malharba, I don't think he will be taken out of the starting lineup. The question I have for you, Tim, though, when we see Steven Kitshoff back to 100%, does Oxenche give way, or has he done enough over the last 12 months or so to be given that starting lineup jersey? Because we saw him throughout that Rugby World Cup. He was an impact player and a half, actually helping the Springboks win a couple games. Does he get rewarded, or does he get just a little bit pushed to the side so that the experience of Steven Kitshoff comes back in?
I actually think I would start him now. I think I'd actually honestly start him. I think beforehand I would have said, no, with Steven Kitshoff, he has that experience under his belt, and he's just a more experienced player than Oxenche. Again, there's not a lot separating them, but you would kind of expect him to kind of be more ready to kind of start. And again, he's partnered up with Frans Mahamba many times as well, so there's definitely nothing wrong with that. It's just more that Oxenche he's settled into this squad now, and particularly in the number 1 position. He looks really strong. So I think it's just a bit of a wrongdoing, really, if you kind of took him out, really, for Steven Kitshoff. So I'd like to stick him in there. But I will throw a question back to you, though, like similar with the conversation around with Malcolm Marx. Like, do you think he should start? Like, if Bongi Manombi wasn't there, or like, do you think Malcolm Marx should be the starter? Or is it because Bongi Manombi is there that he still should be seen as like the bench player? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It does depend a little bit on who else they've got for the hookers, because like you mentioned, when Bongi Umbanambi's there, it works having Umbanambi start and then Malcolm Marx as the guy off the bench. Whereas last week in the game, we saw Johan Grobbelaar start the match up against the Australians, 2 weeks ago, and it didn't really seem to work as well. The line-out seemed a little bit shaky, so in that case, I think you would have been better off with Marx in the starting lineup and then have Grobbelaar coming off the bench later on. But it also comes down to that question of, would you rather have your line-out function at the start of a game or the end of a game? And that's the hard question, because of course it can be very different depending on the circumstances. If you've got a good lead, of course you'd say it doesn't really matter if your line-out's not quite doing the job near the end of the game. But if you're coming down to the wire and you need one good rolling maul near the end of the contest, I want Malcolm Marx throwing
He's
that
guy.
ball in.
He's the guy. Yeah. No, I agree.
I would have him off the bench. And it also seems to be that Rassi might be looking at those younger guys as starters. He's a little bit similar to Quagga Smith, though, that not many players play better off the bench than they do in the starting lineup. Marx is one of them. Quagga's another. And honestly, I feel like they're the front runners in that kind of department. But speaking of impact off the bench, Archie Snyman, he has returned into the side after his injury that did leave him out of both tests up against the Australians. I have chucked him straight back into the starting lineup as my number 5. And then at number 4, Eben Etzebeth. I feel like these two, I talked about front runners, and these two at the moment are that locking duo for the Springboks. They've got a few other guys, Murat, they've got Ruan Nokia, they've got Jansi van Rensburg in the squad for this part of the Rugby Championship. But at the moment for me, like losing Lud de Jager was a big one. Losing Franco Moster, also huge. There's a big difference, I think, between the top locks and the next guys at the moment for South Africa, and maybe that is just based off experience and not quite getting as many minutes as they would need to be able to develop. There's quite a few great options. I mean, Ruben van Heeren, a man who's not even in the squad, does extremely well throughout the URC that maybe one day we will see move in to the Springboks side.
Yeah, for myself, I've gone with the exact same team as you. I have also gone with Eben Etzebeth at number 4 and RJ Snyman number 5. I think, like you said, these are like the sure thing picks really in terms of these positions. And yeah, I mean, the Springboks, this is probably the one area which they're still lacking in, I'd say, in terms of the locks. Like they just don't have every lock available, like you mentioned with Lord Jager and Franco Moster just being out still. It does kind of impact how kind of the Boks will kind of operate in terms of the Rugby Championship, but hopefully moving forward they'll have these locks back and they can kind of like move things around and kind of get their best side going. But for now, I think that is the best combination that the Boks can go with.
Any chance of Peter Steph the Toy playing 5 again, like he did in the first match up against the Australians?
Yeah, so I feel like it's an option which I've actually taken into account with my side, but I will say that I just don't think it's likely that. Like, I think with Peter Steph the Toy, you want to play him in your best position. I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what it came down to what they're thinking. Like, do you want to play at 5 or 7? His best place is at 7. Just play him there from the beginning. If you want to make a switch to 5, go ahead. But I think for the meantime, start him at 7 because that's just, he's going to make the best impact for you there.
I mean, when you talk about impact for that man, we think back to that Rugby World Cup final up against the All Blacks. He was absolutely everywhere throughout that game. Geordie Barrett probably still has nightmares about that contest because Peter Steph the Toy was all over him throughout that whole 80 minutes.
Like,
he'll be waiting, but is Geordie even going to be in the starting lineup for the All Blacks? We've got an All Blacks prediction later on in the week, so be sure to keep an eye out for that as well. But now we move on to the loose forward trio. For yourself, who have you gone with in that loose forward trio?
Yeah, it's for the loose forwards. I have gone with Sia Khaleesi, the number 6. This is where I've gone with Peter Steph the Toy, the number 7. And to finish it off, I have brought him in. I put Jasper Wiese to come into the side right off the back from his suspension. I think he's just, when you have a player like Jasper Wiese available, like now, I think you just got to put him in the firing line. And what better time to do it against the All Blacks at home in South Africa? I just think it's just, I like it. The more I think about it, I just like, it just makes more sense. But again, I do feel a bit bad because like Eric Lowe has done very well actually for his time, what he did within Australia. But we do have to remember that Raz even said beforehand, that was more, he wanted to see how Lowe did within Australia, not within, these All Black games. So it would be fascinating to see if he is brought into this. Because if he is, then fair play, man. That's like a big step up for him. And this will be probably the biggest game of his career. So it would be interesting to see how he would get along. But for now, I just think Jasper Wiese is the more experienced player in the number 8 jersey. And yeah, he's just a force to be reckoned with. So yeah, that's my loose forward trio there.
Isn't it crazy to think about the fact that Jasper Wiese, one moment in a premiership game, however many months ago, meant that he missed so many games for the Springboks. It just shows that even when you have a slight moment where you have a lapse of judgment, that can cost you a long time. It's like how I saw a comment on, I think it was the last game between Australia and South Africa, and people were saying, Etzebeth, why doesn't he throw any punches? It was the craziest comment section that I had seen in a while. But yeah, they were like, if Etzebeth's such a tough guy, why doesn't he punch someone? And the obvious answer is he doesn't want to miss half the year of rugby. Even if you do a little cheeky quick elbow up the middle or something in the breakdown, stomp on a guy's scrotum, then you are still going to be missing for a very long time, and you can't afford that.
Well, you never know. Maybe he was, maybe they're talking about him being a bodyguard for Duplessis, in the UFC. You never know. Maybe that's where that punch is coming in.
I have a feeling though, the way that the middleweight champ fights, I don't think he's going to need a bodyguard. That man just walks forward. Recently, getting the win over the Kiwi, Israel Adesanya. But my loose forward trio, a man who led out Dricus Duplessis at UFC 305, Sia Khaleesi is there as my number 6. Number 7, Peter Steph-Toy. Like I said, that man has to be in the starting lineup. And wherever you play him, he's going to find success. I was very tempted to think about putting him to 5 so that Ben Jason Dixon could have another chance. First time up against the All Blacks for that man. But it's just very hard to get minutes when Peter Steph-Toy is playing the way that he is. Number 8, this is actually where I've gone with Eldrick Lowe. Yes, Professor, I just worry that we haven't seen enough of him throughout the last couple months because of that suspension, that maybe they'll want to ease him into it, possibly bring him off the bench in this game rather than starting. But we move on to the 9-10 combo, and I feel like this has been a very talked about couple positions.
Yes.
No Faf de Klerk for the South Africans in these 2 games of the Rugby Championship. I have gone with Cobus Reinach as my starting 9. Number 10, Andre Pollard. Now, it's been debated big time whether or not Sasha did enough in Australia to warrant a starting spot up against the All Blacks. You'd say in the first game, absolutely. You'd say in the second game, no. Unfortunately, he did have one of his more rough performances in a Springbok kit, but the X factor that young man brings would almost still tempt a lot of people to put him into their starting side. But Pollard, his experience, the way that he has played up against New Zealand in the past, I just feel like that gives him that little bit of an edge. And, of course, versatility, something that we love to talk about. The 2 men that I've got coming off the bench, I'll give you a spoiler, I've got a 6-2 split, and those 2 men cover every single position in the back line. So that's one of the reasons I haven't got Grant Williams in the starting lineup as well.
That's fair. For me, I was in a similar situation to you, like where this is probably the most difficult part of the pitch to kind of choose who you're selecting, because, with Sasha just being so good within Australia, like, it is a tough call in that 10 jersey, but I have also gone with Andre Pollard there, just for the exact same reasons as you. I think he's just the experienced guy. At the end of the day, you want somebody who's experienced, and when you're going against the All Blacks, if it's could be McKenzie versus Andre Pollard, then that's a really good battle to watch. But again, if it's Sasha versus McKenzie, that'd be pretty interesting, because you can make an argument that those 2 are probably more similar, I'd say, in the way they play than, Andre Pollard and McKenzie, because they're kind of different in how they kind of how they utilize their back line, really. So, but still, I want to go with Andre. He's just the standout guy. When it comes to kicking, he's just so reliable. So that's just another thing that he gives you. But with the number 9 jersey, this is where I've gone with the outfield one, and I've gone with Jaden Hendrickse. I've gone, again, similar to Jasper Wiese. I put him straight into the starting lineup. I think he is the best scrum half I think that the Boks have when I'm comparing him to Cobus Reinach as well as Grant Williams. Like, I just think he's the best, like, without a doubt, from those 3, he's the best box kicker. I think I've been the most impressed by him in terms of box kicking. And I would even say better than Faf de Klerk. But it's more about, in this game, I feel like box kicking is going to be definitely a thing that the Boks will try to take advantage of in the high ball. But I think Jaden Hendrickse, he's just a heck of a player, and I want to see him perform. And that combination of Hendrickse and Andre Pollard, I think, would work pretty nicely. Kind of a bit of youth, but also a bit of experience there. So that's another reason why.
Well, that's pretty bold. I'll give you that. That's something that, I mean, if anyone's going to do it, it would be Rusty, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
like,
why not?
If he wants to throw someone in the deep end, see if they can swim. Jaden Hendrickse coming back into the side after very limited minutes for the Springboks, and also very limited minutes for kind of club sides as well, isn't it? Heading into this game. But be interesting to see if him and Pollard.
Why not, man? Why not?
Is it a combination? Could you even see a Hendrickse and Sasha Feinberg, Ngume Zulu? A really young combo? Too risky?
I think that's more risky. That's where the risk is like ready at a high, and I don't want to push it over the limit. So that's why I've gone with Andre Pollard, the safe option, but I've gone with the risky option with Jaden Hendrickse. And I just think he's, like I said, he's a solid player. So I want to see him. Let's see if he can get involved in this game.
Chuck Mani Libok, number 10.
I wouldn't mind it, but no, Andre Pollard.
That's the thing. Up against the All Blacks in that warm-up game just before the Rugby World Cup, he was phenomenal, wasn't he, Mani Libok? And it's crazy to think that was only 12 months ago, and how far down Was it?
I'm sorry. That is the best game of rugby I've ever seen in such a long time. That was just a demolishing. Like that we just whoa, it's just unbelievable. All Blacks just had no answer. It was just a great day because in the past we've had the opposite effect to us many times in the past. So it was a nice feeling. It was a nice feeling. And hey, Manny Libbok, he did kind of lead that team. But do I think he's the man for the job for this one? I think Andre is the guy. You just gotta go with Andre. And again, he's had more minutes off the bench as well, I'd say. So he's kind of prepared for this as well.
Alrighty, so you talk about minutes. Now moving on to the centre pairing. This is somewhere that we've seen two men get a majority of the minutes for the Springboks throughout the last 12 months or so. You've got someone like a Lukhanyo trying to get themselves back into the running. A couple of years ago up against the All Blacks, he was absolutely sensational. Andre Esterhuizen returning back into the Springbok squad, wasn't taken to Australia after getting himself that red card up against the Portuguese, which meant that he was left out of the early stages in the Rugby Championship. Have you gone with a risk here, or have you gone with the stock standard 12 and 13? If there is what we call a stock standard 12 and 13.
Yeah, I actually pretty right on that. Actually, like I think it is the safe option to go in. That's exactly what I have gone with. I have gone with Damien de Linde at 12, Jesse Krill number 13. But trust me, like you know me well. I love both Lukhanyo and Katie Moody, who's also available because he's another player that's kind of available for selection. But I just think you got to go with Jesse Krill. I just think he played in both tests as well, so he's a lot of experience there. And of course, Damien Delaunay was rested in that second test. So it just makes it more likely. I believe he's going to be ready for this one. So that's the reason why I've gone with both of them there. And yeah, look, I honestly believe they're the best combo in the world in terms of centers. So you definitely don't want to break that apart when you're going into the All Blacks. That's for sure.
And it's interesting, last game that they played Lukhanyo is the 12 rather than 13. Is that something we could see maybe the transfer to 12 for Lukhanyo and then maybe more chance of minutes just because of the form of Jesse Krill? But I mean, Damien de Linde's not exactly playing bad rugby either.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, again, you have Andre Esterhuizen in there who's just a solid option there, and he's always been kind of a cover there for Damien de Linde. But you never know. There's a case maybe where if Jesse Krill is becoming more, I'm not sure if I would say this, but if Jesse Krill is more of the preferred option in terms of that centerpiece, like where you don't want to break him apart out of the center duo, then you maybe keep Jesse Krill there. And what you maybe do is you shift Lukhanyo there and maybe have another combination of, I don't know, you could do like Lukhanyo and Katie Moody maybe as the backup in a way, or like something which we haven't seen before. So it would be intriguing. But for now, I just think we have to go with the box standard. And again, I know it's box standard, but when we say that, we're saying this in the kindest way possible because they are one of the best combinations in the world. And I believe it's the best combination in the world. But yeah, Damien de Linde, Jesse Krill, you got to have them.
And I have gone with that exact same combo. Damien de Linde has my number 12, Jesse Krill number 13. I feel like Krill just goes from strength to strength. I don't know why, but I decided I'd look through at some old comments. And I looked through at what people were saying about Jesse Krill about 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And tell you what, some of those comments, they do not brush around the subject. Some people called him a dead weight. Some said that he should never be close to that Springbok kit again. And then now everyone's like, don't take him out. We need him in that 13 jersey. So it's crazy how good Jesse Krill has got when he was probably, in a lot of the public's opinion, only 1 or 2 games away from not getting a chance again. Like, that's just how quick the rugby world can change, and how many games have been changed by Jesse Krill since those moments is quite unbelievable. But now we move on to the back three, the unbelievable trio. They have been going brilliantly for the Springboks. The battle with the headgears out on the wings. They've got a very talkative number 15 in Willie LaRue. I've pretty much just told you who I've gone with, and I think it is my turn, so I might as well tell you. Number 11, I've gone with Kurt Arendse. Number 14, Cheslin Colby. Number 15, Willie LaRue. Now, Makazole Mapimpi, I mentioned about it on my Springboks XB video. He's going to be extremely unlucky, I believe, throughout the next kind of 2 or so years, because the fact that he can't play off the bench, or at least chooses not to really be that impact player off the bench, seeing as he's only a one-position person, like, it means that he's going to really struggle to get minutes when he's not starting. And because he's been solid, right? He's done nothing really wrong, but there are those guys with the X factor, such as a Kurt Arendse, who scored in pretty much every single game that he's played in terms of his succession rate. And you've got Cheslin Colby, who's just so tricky to take out of the side. I think Moody is going to maybe struggle to get minutes as well.
Yeah.
It's just a really good but also bad problem to have. Good for the Springboks in terms of their depth, bad for the players who are so good that just can't quite get into that starting side. And I feel like that's a trend that may continue for a little bit longer. Edwell van der Merwe, perfect example. He did really, really well in the first game that he was able to play for the Springboks. Have we seen him since? I don't think so.
I feel bad for him, actually, because he actually did pretty well, actually, in his opening test against Wales. But
home stadium as well.
Yeah,
I should mention. So
it's I just feel bad for him because I think at the end of the day, you have Pimpy, who's a better player in terms of being a specialist 11. Again, with him, he can play 11 and 14, I guess, with Van der Merwe. So he's a bit more versatile in that way. But still, I just wouldn't include him in our 37-man squad. So it's a tough choice.
Willie le Roux, I feel like this one isn't as tough to decide. Apalele Fassi, still, I don't think's done terribly throughout the times that he's had in the Springbok jersey, but when you look at a game up against the All Blacks, I feel like you want someone who's been there, done that, and Willie le Roux does just offer you a lot of stability and a lot of execution from the back. Definitely if he's going head-to-head with more than likely Beauden Barrett. I feel like you want to have those two brains working against each other, and that's why I've got Willie le Roux as my number 15.
No, I like it. Similar to you, I've also gone with Curly Lorenza, the number 11 jersey. Then Cheslin Kobe, number 14. And then, of course, Willie le Roux, number 15. So, it's just one of those where I think it is the best combination that the Springboks can go with. I just think, Curly Lorenza, he was sensational in the opening test, getting 2 tries under his name. And then Cheslin Kobe, I think he did a lot more in that second test compared to the first test because he really just wasn't involved in that first test. So that was at least something which he can kind of bring into this opening test if he was to start. And then, Willie le Roux, just... he had an interesting, I guess, set of tests, really, because, again, he was part of that first one. And, he played a good game, actually, a very solid game. But, of course, he had that one moment where, we obviously, at the time, we thought, like, what is he doing? He should pass the ball. But actually, the more I looked at the highlights, it actually seemed like the player was like kind of a bit behind him. So he had to do like a bit of like a U-turn pass, like where you go all the way behind, where the players are rushing in. But look, it's one of those where you can't do much about it now. But Willie le Roux, he's definitely the 15. There is a case if you wanted to say you could put Sash at the 15 if you wanted to kind of include him that badly, because in both our case, we haven't put him in that 10 position. But I think you just got to go with Willie le Roux because he is the most experienced player there. His IQ is off the charts, and he has a passing ability which can just find players in spaces which can kind of break the lines. So that's why I want him there in my 15 jersey.
It's felt like an eternity since we've seen Damian Willemse out there on the field for the Springboks. But he's getting closer to returning. I feel like once he is back, that probably pushes Apalele Fassi just down one more man in terms of that 15 jersey, unless, of course, they're trying to find Damian Willemse as a fly half, which I don't think worked last time. In the centres, it's pretty hard to get a spot there at the moment with the form of certain players. So, it might end up being the case of Willie le Roux. But then you've also got Sasha. It's going to be a really big problem. They're going to have to make a new rule that you can have like 25 players in a side just so that we can see all these Springboks.
The whole bench is going to be, the second bench will be all 10s. At this rate, we're going to have all 10s on our bench. Like, it's going to be crazy. There's even a case where, I'm not sure if they'll do this, but like, because I don't believe he's played that good to kind of warrant this, but there's a case where you could say, what if Fassi takes Manny Libbok's place in terms of the side? There's a switch there. But that's only because of like, I don't think he's done enough to do that because I think Manny Libbok's just been so good for the Boks. But I just think it's one of those where if he's not going to start or even being off the bench, then there's a case where maybe if you need more cover in that position, you could. But it depends on other players as well. So I think that's a bit more complicated to say. But for now, I think stick with for what it is.
Well, you got Sia Masuku as well, a man who's done brilliantly for the Sharks throughout the URC, who honestly, I just don't know how they can get him in the side. His goal kicking's solid, so that's something that maybe he goes ahead of Manny Libbok in that regard. But there's just too many options at the moment in that 10 and 15 jersey. The fact that even like someone like a Cheslin Colby could play number 15 if you really needed him to. It's spoiled for choice, I think, is the best way of describing it.
Can play there if need be.
That's true. Versatility everywhere you look in the Springbok side. But now we move on to the bench. Have you gone with the 6-2 for yourself, Tim, in this contest?
I haven't gone with the 6-2. This is where I've been a bold painter.
You haven't done the 7-1, have you?
No, I haven't. Okay. And there's a reason for that. And I'll explain, like, I was never going to do a 7-1 because I just think for the situation the Boks are in terms of their locks, I just don't think they can actually do that. I mean, I'll be very surprised they do that, but I just don't think it'll happen. 6-2 is probably the most standard one and what I expect them to go into it. But for me to get this one player in, I went with a 5-3. And I think there's another reason why I did it because, I mean, going with the first three here, I have gone with Malcolm Marks, then I've gone with Stephen Kitsoff, and then Vincent Koch. So they're kind of like the front row there. But I'll get into the rest, kind of explain the reason why I've come up with 5-3.
Righty, so I have gone with the 6-2. Number 16, I have got Malcolm Marks. Has to be somewhere in the 23-man side. Number 17, Stephen Kitsoff. Now, he's only had a few minutes, I believe, in the Curry Cup so far since returning. And in that game, he didn't look his best, but that's understandable because of how long he's been out for. But I would have him somewhere in this 23, as I do believe he will take that number 17 or the number 1 jersey as the competition progresses. It just means, unfortunately for Gerhard Stennekamp, he will probably move to that third choice elusive prop. And then number 18, this is where I have got Vincent Koch. Has really not done anything wrong in the games that he's been playing in, so might as well keep him in the lineup. But now we move on to the rest of my forwards. I have got 3 more. Number 19, Salman Murat here. So I've gone with as their 19. Number 20, the impact player, Quagga Smith. Had to be somewhere in my Springboks 23. And then number 21, this is actually where I've got Jasper Wiese to give him some minutes in the second half of this contest. Maybe around, I want to say like 25 to 30 minutes in the later stages of the match. Eldrick Lowe more than likely would give way for Jasper Wiese to go out there. And then you've still got Quagga who can cover for Khaleesi as well as Peter Steph-Toy.
Do you think that's a bit harsh on Marco van Staden now? I just think I'm just saying that I know it's hard to make these choices, but do you think I think he played pretty well within the Australia games? Do you think it's a bit hard, or it's one of those hard decisions you just got to make?
Do you think it would be harsh to have Eldrick Lowe completely out of the 23-man side?
I mean, we'll see.
I'm just throwing this around because is he in your 23?
That's what I was going to say, because I haven't done that. So, because I haven't included him in my team, so that's where. Yeah, I mean, for my case, this is where it gets a bit interesting because I actually haven't gone with a lock in my bench because I've gone for the scenario where Peter Steph-Toy, with the second half, will come into that kind of locking position for most likely RJ Snyman. And then the idea is that I'll have both Marco van Staden and Quagga Smith to come off and kind of help that kind of loose forward trio and kind of help them kind of sharpen them up, really. And I think that's kind of the way I want to see it going forward. I mean, you never know. That could be the first time ever that if the Boks are going to do it. I don't think a team's ever gone without a lock off the bench. But if there is a case, the Boks somehow could surprise us. So that's the reason why I've gone with, I guess, an interesting move there.
Alrighty, so you have got Marco van Staden, you have got Quagga Smith. I feel like Smith was always going to be somewhere, wasn't he? Yeah. And the thing is, they've done it before. Maybe even the starting 8 position is where we could see Quagga like they did in the earlier stages of the year. It would be a surprise, but at the same time, Springboks are full of surprises. It probably would work all right. So see what they do end up doing there. So that leaves you with 3 replacement backs, whereas I have only got myself the 2. So who have you got at 22, 23, and also that halfback at 21?
So for the halfback, this is where I have gone with Grant Williams. He's my replacement scrum half there. For the 22, this is where I've gone with Caden Moody. This is the player I wanted to fit into the side. And I think he looked so sharp for what I saw in the highlights he did for the Bulls. I mean, I'm not sure you saw that behind the back pass he did. That was like, whoo, that's just nasty. So I want to see a bit more. I want to see that involved in this game. Because, again, if I'm not including Kanye Am, who normally does those behind the back passes against the All Blacks, I want to at least have one player who can do that. So I'm going to go with Caden Moody off the bench there. And again, he's very versatile as well because he can play, winger or one of the center spots. And then the final one, of course, this is where I have gone with Sasha Feinberg, Zulu. I just think he's the player you have to have involved, and he deserves to be part of this 23-man squad. He played superb in that first test, like we said. In the second test, yes, he didn't play as good as the first one, but he had moments in there where he was sharp, looked good, and just hopefully he can make an impact off this bench.
Right, so for myself, I have got 22 Grant Williams. So I have decided to go with him as my guy with a bit of versatility, being able to play at halfback or out on the wing. Worst comes to worst, and then also a very versatile player as my number 23, and that is Sasha Feinberg, Zulu. I feel like you have to have him somewhere in this 23-man side, a little bit similar to what you said, how he deserves to at least get that opportunity up against the All Blacks, because he's one of those players, he's been thrown in the deep end a few times, and he's managed to do very well. That second match up against the Australians maybe wasn't his best performance, but that's still only one out of about the 6 times that we've seen that man make his way out onto the field for the Boks, and every other time he has looked very, very strong. But nonetheless, we do thank you all very much for tuning in. As soon as the Springboks are announced, of course, we will have the video coming out on the channel, but do let us know who you think Rassie Erasmus will go with in his 23-man side, as well as who you would go with if you were in charge of the Springboks. But be sure to check out Rugbyitch's YouTube channel. The link will be in the description as well as the pinned comment. Thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and we will see you all for the next one.